Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today we are going to discuss about the background and background of nanotechnology, or what you can say nowadays we know that the nanotechnology is doing progress, but in order to have a nanotechnology here, or maybe the studies what we are doing in nanotechnology is not a result of just one day or one night, right? So it has got its background, and this background is totally based on because of the electron microscopes. Without tools and techniques, the nanotechnology wouldn't have existed. That is for sure. Because when in optical when the famous talk was given by Richard Feynman in 1959, when he suggested all of the scientists to work at atomic and molecular scale. So he meant that all the scientists has to work at this particular scale. So imagine the person working less than the micro level without microscope. It wouldn't have been possible, because we can't see the materials, we can't see their dimensions, we can't see their morphology. Without looking at their morphology, their dimensions, or maybe their size, shape, or their three-dimensional structures, or maybe the XRD data what we are getting. With these all things plays a very important role. Okay, these in order to see, or in order to know about this particular morphology, we need to we should have some certain tools like electron microscopes, because we know that under optical microscopes we can view microbes, right? We can view certain microbes, bacteria, fungus, or viruses. But when it comes to if the particle size, or if any size falls less than half of the de Broglie variant, that is less than for example around 350 nanometer, then we cannot see these particular things in optical microscopes. The reason is very simple: because light cannot be used as a source of for this thing, because it's not in visible range. So we have to go for we have to replace the light beam into the electron beam. So that's when all these things started. So the background for the nanotechnology usually goes with the experimental advances that happen in terms of the technical aspects, or say the tools what we got, like from we should be grateful for the IBM for their magnificent inventions of STM, that is scanning tunnel microscope, SEM scanning electron microscope, atomic force microscope, all these things. So that because of these electron microscopes only we are able to see the nanomaterials, or other these things. And now we already know what is nanotechnology, nanomaterials, everything. I am not going to push again the same thing. So let's stick to the topic. So that's why I just explained why we have to state a background or experimental advances of nanotechnology, because in order to see something you need to have something, right? Like for example, without tools and techniques, without electron microscope, it would have been possible such a great whatever the journey that nanotechnology has been doing since last 3 to 4 decades, right? So let's start with the points. So in 17th century, the Dutch scientist Hans Lippershey, okay, so he was the one he succeeded in making the first telescope as well as the microscope. So he was the one in 17th century, he developed the telescope, what we see, what we use for the space, and also the microscope. Right, we know what is microscope, where even at micron scale we can view with the help of the light as a beam. Whereas limitation with the traditional optical microscopes was that they can't resolve objects that are smaller than the de Broglie wavelength, or half of the wavelength of the light, or visible light. So that we cannot see any particles which are falling under the molecules, or maybe 350 or 300 nanometer. or maybe in the atomic level, or just more than that. Like for example, the nano comes under in between the atomic scale and the molecular scale. That's what we discussed in the previous class, right? So when we are using these tools and techniques and microscopes, the optical microscope, we cannot see if any particle size is going less than 400 or 300 nanometer. So for that we need to have the particular electron microscopes. Like we need to replace the light beam into the electron beam. So based on the deep of the theory, so Ernst Ruska, so he was the first one at University of Berlin. He invented TEM, that is transmission electron microscope, in 1933. So in Berlin, Germany, he invented the TEM, that is Ernst Ruska invented the TEM in 1933. From that was the first electron microscope which is being used to study, or which is being used to visualize the three-dimensional structure of the nanomaterials. So in TEM, it was in 1933, back then, even before this particular the Richard Feynman's famous talk. But this TEM was developed in 1933 only. So in TEM, focused electron beam sent to the object. Okay, what happens in TEM is whatever in the place of in optical microscope we are having the light beam, right? So similarly, here we will be having the electron beam instead of the light beam. So in TEM, a focused electron beam sent to the object which interacts with it. That means whatever the object it is. For example, I have the object as a sample which contains some silver or gold nanoparticles. Right, so that will be your object or a sample. So the electron beam comes and it will be focused on to this object, or the specimen or sample, where it interacts. This electron beam interacts with it and it transmits. So that's why this transmission electron microscope. When this is the object, the electron beam comes, it transmits through this particular object or the sample or the specimen, and the data shows the composition of the objects. Now whatever these electrons are coming, whatever the secondary electrons, what we can say here, the first primary electrons, and once it transmits, it gets the status of secondary electrons. Why? Because the electrons which is moving here, it has got no information, but once it is transmitted through the sample, because of this transmission, the electron beam has got the information about the structure of this particular dimension, the materials which are present in this object or sample. So I can say the nanoparticles of rhombohedral or different shape, because three-dimensional image you will get, because once the electron is transmitted, the three-dimensional image can be formed, and that is what we mean under transmission electron microscope. So we can say that whether nanoparticles are spherical, whether they are cubic, or whether they are rhombohedral, or maybe the pentagon or hexagonal structures. All those things can be visualized in TEM. So come back to the nanotechnology and nanoscience, they got a boost in the early 1980s with two major developments that we know, that the birth of the cluster science. The birth of the cluster science in 1980s was a magnificent development that happened, and that may also plays a very important role as a background for the nanotechnology. Okay, the birth of the cluster science, because we know that from the atoms to the molecules to then the clusters. So that means the birth of the cluster science is nothing but the ability to study at the molecular level, right? The birth of the cluster science and the invention of this scanning tunneling microscope, that's played a very important role. In 1981, IBM Zurich lab, they developed the Gold-Winning and Henrik Roller, they developed the STM, and this STM is superbly, it's very different from all other electron microscope, because this STM will have the atom which is attached on a tip of this particular electron microscope, where a single atom can have, we can have a single interaction with a single atom. So we can pick single atom from the sample. Can you imagine that? I have told you in the previous class the story of the atomic bomb, and how exactly important and how dangerous at atomic level. When we are talking about the atomic level, the science is totally changes. Even less than molecular level, that's why we are having separate field as nanoscience and nanotechnology, right? So now we are dealing with the atoms, and you are able to pick and manipulate the atoms. You can able to pick a single atom and place somewhere else. Can you imagine? That's actually the biggest invention in terms of the any kind of tools and techniques so far, whatever we are having, and so far, so much what is it, the revolution, whatever happened in the scientific field, because the STM plays a very important role because of its the manipulation of the atoms. Okay, that's why they got the Nobel Prize also for STM development, because they also developed other microscopes like AFM and SEM and all. The STM stands still STM stands are one of the best invention by IBM. So STM also plays a very important role as a background for the nanotechnology. Without STM, the nanotechnology wouldn't have been come so far whatever it is today. So STM uses a fine tip needle which consists of only a single atom. So that's what I just told you. It consists of the very fine tip needle is there, and it consists of only a single atom. Okay, so as the tip nears the sample surfaces, so what happens? It's electron tunnel between the samples. So you might have heard the concept as tunneling, right? So tunneling is something where the vibration occurs, right? So when the tunneling, when there is no electronic conduction happens, or if the electron, imagine the electron is in the well, so we can able to take that electron, and then we can able to make that electron jump if the continuous tunneling is there. So in other words, in layman language, if something is not conducting, we can make it conducting through the process called tunneling, right? So here the same tunneling mechanism it uses. As the tip nears to the sample, what happens? The tunneling mechanism happens between this atom to the atom which is fixed in the tip to the atoms which are present on the sample, right? So resulting the cross-sectional images at the scale of the individual atoms. So you will get the images at individual atoms. That means at atomic scale we might get the images even 0.1 nanometer also. So STM was also used for measuring the magnetism at the atomic level in 2002. So in 2002, so they also used the STM in order to as we know, at atomic scale the properties are different, or at nanoscale the properties are different. Even that's why. So when the magnetism in the bulk, whatever it is there, is not the same at atomic or molecular scale, because it completely changes. So even in order to know that, in order to measure, or in order to identify, or in order to study the magnetism at atomic level, that was done in 2002 by using with the help of STM. That's how the STM plays a very important role as a background for the nanotechnology. And the biggest background for the nanotechnology is this statement, which was given by the great physicist. Okay, physicist. There is plenty of room at the bottom. So there is plenty of room at the bottom. So he meant that there are a lot of things we can still concentrate, and we can still exploit a lot of applications if we concentrate, if every scientific community concentrates at studying at atomic and molecular scale. So that's what led everyone to think at the molecular scale, and that's what led Nanotechnology to coin the term nanotechnology, because when they started working, they came to know that when the particles are falling under 300 nanometer or 200 nanometer, they are behaving strangely. Completely different science in the sense it's not the new science, which is being already proposed by Einstein and Dewey Scholar and Schrödinger and De Broglie. Everyone will have already those who talked about it earlier 20th century in 1905 to almost 1930. This all those 25 years was the magnificent development happened in the physics, and that's the era that differentiated old physics into the new physics, that is called as quantum mechanics or quantum physics. So because of this physics, and when they already knew this quantum physics, and when we came to know that the nanomaterials also exhibit this quantum confinements or quantum effects in the nanomaterials, they were amazed. And then that's how the nanotechnology came into picture, and the new term was called by the Nanotechnology in 1974. If I'm not wrong, in the previous class we have studied this, right? So this man was he acted as a driving force in order to start the nanotechnology. So it doesn't mean that nanotechnology was not there before that. that even in 400 BC also we studied, the things were there. They used to make the swords, they used to make the cups, but they didn't know that this is the technology, right? So now we have, because of the availability of the tools and the techniques or the electron microscopes or all these things, we are able to say that because of the nanomaterials, because of these quantum effects, that's why the nanomaterials properties are changing. Because of this change only, they are exhibiting excellent optical properties, like what we had in Lacargue's curve. If you remember, in the refracted light it was showing green in color, and in the reflected light, in the transmitted light, it was showing red in color. That was the reason. This is the reason we were able to find out only after the electron microscope inventions. Then only the people started, the scientists started taking the samples of these things, and then when they visualized, they came to know that existence of gold and silver nanoparticles on these particular walls of the Lacargue. So same thing was for the Damascus sword, what we discussed, where the carbon nanotubes and colloidal suspension of gold and stannic and oxide nanoparticles were present, and same thing was for purple of glaciers and Maya blue painting, stannic oxide and other silica nanoparticles were present in the Maya blue painting, which is being preserved in many museums. So these all things came into picture only after the nanotechnology came into picture, as and that the driving force was this man, right? So he was known for his contribution to the physics, in quantum physics, liquid helium, particle physics, quantum electrodynamics, and superfluidity. Even if you are interested about in quantum electronics, you might have heard his name. Even in quantum electronics, he had made his name. He had made his own gates, which are Feynman gates, like reversible gates. What we are having is computation nowadays also. We are using the old physics. It is following Boolean algebra plus the laws of the classical physics. If you are talking about the quantum mechanics or quantum computers or supercomputers, so it will be starting about the Boolean algebra plus laws of quantum physics, not the classical physics. Classical physics is the old physics, quantum physics is the new physics. So classical physics is whatever the physics we have studied so far, even in our plus 2 level or whatever it is. Quantum physics is something which is restricted to the atomic scale, how exactly the science works. There may be the behavior of the nuclei, behavior of the atom, behavior of the electrons, or behavior of even the large comets, all other things also comes under quantum mechanics, right? So he was expert in all these fields. Even he had his own reversible gates, where the quantum classical physics, classical computation is the name of whatever the computation we are having now. But the quantum computation is something which is very, very fascinating, and which follows the laws of quantum physics. So the difference is a very small difference I would like to give, is that classical physics or classical computation, whatever we are using now, it is considered the globe as information. We are having in classical physics only North Pole and South Pole. Okay, in classical computation, whereas in quantum computation, the whole globe information can be gained. So they will be getting qubits. We are having bits in quantum computation, classical computation, whereas in quantum computation we will be having qubits, right? Like that. So a famous lecture given by the physicist Richard Feynman at the American Physical Society meeting at Caltech on December 29, 1959. Okay, so Feynman considered the possibility of direct manipulation of individual atoms as a more powerful form of synthetic chemistry than those used at that particular time. So one of the most publicly known scientists in the world has given this particular statement, which led everyone to work on this. And he not only this, to motivate the scientists or to motivate the young minds, he has announced the two challenges, and he also offered the prize of $1,000 for the first individual to solve each one. So what was his two challenges? One was to make the nano motor, or that means during that time there was no term was nano term was not there, but the possible smallest motor he meant. And the second one, this thing was to write entire encyclopedia on a tip of a pen. Okay, so let's see who achieved this, who got this challenge, and who got the award and all. See, the first challenge was to construct the nano motor. which to Feynman's surprise was achieved very soon, just within this was within a year, maybe hardly 11 months, because in December 29th and 1959 was the challenge was given, and in November 1960 the smallest nano motor at that time I'm talking about. In 1960, whatever the nano motors were, motors were there, the smallest motor he had developed in this William McLaren has developed. That was around, almost you can see the scale here, 500 micrometer. Okay, so he built an electrical motor small enough to fit in a box that is 1 by 64th of the inch square. That means 1 by 64th of inch square, in the sense in 1 inch square. Okay, the 64 motors can fit. Understanding? Working in his lunch hours, McLaren, a physicist at the California Institute of Technology, that is CIT, built this motor using a microscope, watchmaker's lathe, and a toothpick. So these are the three things he used. He used microscope, he used watchmaker's lathe, and a toothpick, and he made the smallest motor at that time in 1960s. So, and he got his particular award, that is $1,000 from Richard Feynman. So it took him 2.5 months to build, just 2.5 months to build, which weighed around 250 millionth of a gram. That means less than 250. If a gram is 1, and less than 250 millionth of that. That means very small, right? So today the field of the microelectronics, we know that microelectromechanical systems, MEMS, what we say, that engineering has progressed to such an extent that the motors hundreds of times smaller than even the McLarens have been produced. That even nowadays we are having the less than 100 micrometer or less than 10 micrometer nanomotors we are having. That means almost we are having less than 50 micrometer. So 5 micrometer or something like that, right? So that's how the technology has been advanced. The microelectronics system, whatever we have, MEMS, and then comes the NEMS, that is electromechanical systems. That's why the overall things will act as a background of the nanotechnology. The second challenge involved in the possibility of scaling down letters small enough so as to be able to fit an entire Encyclopedia Britannica on head of the pin. That means this prize was claimed in 1985. It took almost maybe 26 years. Yes. So this was achieved by Tom Newman. So McLaren's nanomotor, whatever I was explained, is the same copy paste, nothing else. The second challenge, this was done by Tom Newman. So this is what he has written. Just see, the tip was just a 60 nanometer. In 60 nanometer, he has written all these things, right? So the famous stuff, whatever has been done. So all these things. So as soon as I mention this, people tell me about miniaturization and how far it has progressed today. All these things. So they tell me about the electric motors, all these things. He explained all these things. I don't have to read all these things. So just remember that. Just imagine that in 1985, not now, within the 60 nanometer, he had made sure that he wrote all these things, right? So now the scale of the things, the nanometers and the more things, and how exactly we can correlate and how we can see that how small it is. So we know that the things that is the naturally which is already there, and things which is man-made, right? We will start with the millimeter. That is, we know that the ant is around 5 millimeter, or a dust mite is around 200 micrometer. And here the same thing, if you are talking about a micro world, we are having head of the pin that we use, okay, is around 1 to 2 millimeter in diameter. So then we are having the fly ash around whatever the ash flies, which we cannot see also, that will be around 10 to 20 micrometer. And human hair, the width or the diameter, okay, is around 60 to 120 micrometer wide. If you are comparing that with the natural things or man-made things, we are having the MEMS, that is 10 to 100 micrometer wide. That's what I told you. Nowadays we are having 100 times lesser than whatever the nanomotor which is being done by the McLaren. Next, we are having the red blood cells. Naturally, we are having RBCs in our blood. We are having RBCs, platelets, and all. So, whereas RBC plays a very important role, which carries the oxygen to every part of our body, which is now with the help of hemoglobin, right? So, that is around, their size diameter is around how much? It is around 7 to 8 micrometer. And if the possible things, if you want to come again, that also comes as 10 to 100 micrometer mm will come. So or zone plate X-ray lens. So that is around nearly around 35 nanometer, right? That's where the man-made things started coming in. Next, we are having the 10 nanometer diameter, or we are having ATP synthase. If you are a biology student, you will be knowing what is ATP, ADP, AMP, and all. That is adenosine triphosphate. So here, the diameter of the ATP is around 10 nanometer. And if you are speaking about the man-made things, self-assembled nature-inspired structures, that is many tens of the nanometer. Nanotube is its diameter is around 1 to 3 nanometer, or carbon buckyball is less than almost nearly 1 nanometer in diameter. Okay, and we are having the DNA. DNA is, we know that its diameter is around 2.5 nanometer or nearly 2 nanometer. Next, atoms of silicons, it's about 0.078 nanometer. Even those things we can see nowadays with the help of electron microscopes. But the man-made things, that is silicon atoms, again natural things. See, you can see the 4 atoms here in silicon, whatever we discussed. And see here, the man-made things, they are having the quantum coral of 48 iron atoms on copper surface, positioned one at a time with the help of scanning tunneling microscope tip, right? So you can see the different atoms here. These all are nothing but atoms. That is also can be seen in the images. That is the coral diameter is around 14 nanometer, and if you see the diameter of the DNA and diameter of the carbon nanotube, it's almost same. So here the natural things are inspire us to get the get going into the nanoscale, because see, we are a product of our DNA, right? So, but we imagine how powerful the nanoscale it has got. The DNA's diameter is around 2 to 2.5 nanometer, right? So the same thing when the materials are reduced to in such a low scale, they are also having they are exhibiting excellent electrical properties, excellent mechanical properties, excellent optical properties. The carbon nanotubes are known for its high thermal conductivity. So far in the world, this carbon nanotube was discovered in 1991 by Ejima, Japanese scientist, right? So till now, it is the highest thermal conductive material on Earth, right? Then we are having the graphene, which is the highest stiffest material on Earth. It has been said that if this graphene sheet is spread across a pencil, and if the elephant stands on this, just imagine, and this particular whatever the graphene sheet is, then that will not even bend. That means so much stiffness it has got. So the carbon nanotubes are nothing but what? The fold shape of graphenes. So if you fold it in horizontally, we get the zigzag carbon nanotubes, which will give a different electrical property. And if you fold it horizontally, you get armchair, which will give you a different electrical property. And if you fold it in a chiral with a certain angle, you will get a chiral carbon nanotubes. Which carbon nanotube has got plenty of applications. The carbon nanotubes can be a conductor if it is maybe the armchair, and it can be a semiconductor if it is zigzag, and if it can be an insulator if it is chiral. So based on the structure, the carbon nanomaterials properties change. That means here the moral of the story is that the nanomaterials we can manipulate. With the help of nanomaterials, we can manipulate the properties, and whatever properties we want, we can get those properties done. And applications also will have plenty, because surface area is more compared to the value. So that's how this is the comparison between the natural things which are at nanoscale from micro to nanoscale, and whereas things which are man-made from micro to centimeter to the macro to the millimeter to the centimeter, micrometer to the nanoscale. So, for example, one of the thing what we can say how fascinating this particular nanotechnology is that that we will see in the next class.